The movie first depicts a beautiful and peaceful residential area, and the families living there are financially happy and wealthy, and look like an ideal family. Husband's name is Don, wife's name is Mona, and they have two children named Allison and Andrew. Mona rules in this family with her arrogant demeanor, and you have to obey everything she says. Her marital relationship is very strict and everything must be programmed according to Mona's will. Their days are not as happy or intimate as a healthy family should be. In fact, Mona has undue insecurities with her children, demanding that they always be winners in everything, even if that has to be achieved in a bad way. Any form of transgression or disobedience is fatal and she will be severely punished by her. Don is actually quite depressed and not happy with the situation, along with Mona's frequent refusal to get along with him. That's because Mona is someone with big ambitions, and she plans everything carefully, including her time flirting with Don. Under the pretext of keeping peace in his family, Don decides to patiently accept his life circumstances. As for her profession, Don works as a manager in a fairly large furniture store. The shop was built with money from Mona's parents, so Mona is technically the owner of the shop. One day, the store is hiring a new employee, and a woman named Dusty comes to Don's store for an interview. Don seems attracted to Dusty from her first moments. Also, Don's employee and her neighbor Les expresses her happiness by only asking Don to accept her woman's marriage proposal. He also explains that you need to look for something to take your mind off the stressful marriage. In the midst of this, a man seems to have killed a man. He then watches a television commercial for Don's furniture store that is currently airing. It turns out that this man and his gang have begun tracking the whereabouts and activities of Don and his wife. Meanwhile, Don is having a boring day with his wife and one of the gang is following him to find out where he is. One day he has an affair with Dusty, finally allowing him to escape from his daily routine. At this point, their relationship begins to deepen and become more intimate. This makes Don and Mona's relationship even less interesting. Everything went smoothly for Don at first, and he managed to keep his affair a secret from Mona. Until one day Don's family throws a party. Dusty tells Don the very bad news that he is pregnant with her child. As a result, Don is stunned to learn this, as Dusty had previously taken birth control pills. She refuses an abortion because Dusty also wants a child. Also, she continues to urge Don to take responsibility for her own wrongdoings. Don then goes to Lay and asks for advice on her Dusty's pregnancy. As most people do, Lay Don offers Dusty her money in exchange for her silence and her life for Don. Mr. Lay believes women like Dusty are among the gold diggers who tend to blackmail established men like Don. And what Lay said is actually true. Because Dusty turns out to be the lover of the gangster named Murphy she saw earlier. In other words, Murphy hires Dusty to lure wealthy men so they can get their share of the wealth. But this time, Dusty seems to really like Target. Briefly, Don takes less advice and gives Dusty $13,000. Don asks her to end the relationship and never see her again. However, Dusty refuses as she feels she is being treated like a whore. At this point, Don is really worried that her own mistake could cause her home to fall apart, lose her children, and of course Mona to spiral out of control. To make matters worse, her threats don't end there. Because $13,000 isn't enough money for Murphy. He then orders Dusty to demand more money from Don, this time an even higher price of $25,000. The only problem is that Don is completely out of money and doesn't know what to do with Dusty, who keeps blackmailing him. With no other option, Don finally decides to take the risk and be honest with his wife, and he tells Mona everything he's been doing. Surprisingly, Mona seemed a little calmer and reacted in a way that Mike didn't expect. Instead, she asks if Don still loves her and she replies that Don loves her and her children very much and would do anything to right his wrongs. Well, it won't be easy as Don still has to deal with his wife's anger. Mona starts talking about all she's done and all the opportunities she and her parents have provided him with. At this point, Mona orders Don to kill Dusty to stop extorting money and begins to reveal a darker side of herself. Mona insists that anyone who dares to disturb her family's integrity will die at her hands. Dusty then calls Don to pick up her $20,000 in cash, telling Mona to pick it up. At this point, Mona presents her with two options. Either a divorce, meaning Don will lose her wife and child, or the second option is to follow Mona's orders and kill Dusty. Now he's thinking about how he can have the heart to kill, but he's also terrified of losing his beloved family. The next day, Mona continues to pressure her husband into committing the murder before Dusty comes to the office at night to collect the money. She even prepared a high dose of medicine to kill Dusty. When Mona sees Dusty's fear, she becomes angry and persuades Dusty to fight the people who are trying to destroy her family. Left with no other choice, Don is forced to follow Mona's plan and begins thinking of ways to initiate her act. Later that day, Dusty arrives and Don welcomes her by giving her her medicated drink. While drinking it, Dusty sees Don acting strange and feels strange. Shortly after, Dusty finally realizes she's been drugged, and the chemicals in her body begin to react and she collapses. Mona shows up and tells Dusty to put him in the trunk. Back home, Don is still too scared to make his next move, and is shocked to find Dusty still alive. However, Mona saw this and laughed and she told Don to get the hammer. Don then gives the gavel to Mona, but Mona instead tells Don to give it to correct his mistake. Don gets scared and explains that he really can't do that, so Mona tells him to open the trunk and lets him do it. Dusty's body is then taken to the garage, and Mona begins dismantling Dusty herself. Unable to bear it all, Don runs into the bathroom, surrenders to what is happening there, and vomits. Meanwhile, Murphy becomes suspicious when Dusty has been missing for several days and hasn't heard from him. When Don comes home from work the next day, he sees Murphy talking to his son outside the house and panics. It turns out that Murphy asked Don to meet him because he wanted to know where Dusty was. When Murphy meets Don at the club, Murphy immediately asks where Dusty has disappeared. At this point, Don still gave Dusty the money. He can lie that he doesn't know where Dusty went. Dusty brings the money and Murphy urges Don to give him $20,000 by tomorrow or he'll do bad things to his wife and kids. After the meeting, Mona tells Don that he needs to dig Dusty up again and go to Dusty and the gang's house. At this point, Mona comes up with a plan to deal with the gang the night Don and Murphy reunite at the club. Arriving on the front of the house, Mona breaks into the gang's house, but there is no one there as they are already at the club. Mona then puts something that is part of Dusty's body in the refrigerator. This includes the part of the head that was decapitated some time ago. Shortly after, one of the gang arrives with a woman, whom Mona promptly kills with a kitchen knife taken from her home. After Mona leaves the house, the surviving man calls Murphy and tells him what happened at her house. Meanwhile, Mona picks up her secret phone and calls the police about a disturbance at Murphy's house. As soon as Murphy hears this, he rushes to her house where he is shocked to see Mona messing up her house. He also discovers the remains of Dusty's body that Mona had kept in her refrigerator. That's when Murphy finally realizes he's been captured by Mona and all the murder evidence points to him. Police arrived at the same time, and the husband was shot dead by the police. But Murphy manages to sneak into her house through her secret door. One night, Don becomes curious about everything her wife is doing and tries to ask her about Mona's past. He believes that traumatic or tragic events Mona experienced in her childhood influenced her current behavior. Mona's reaction to Don's question takes an unexpected turn and becomes very emotional. Mona says her parents are perfect and would never hurt her. And she vows that if Don asks him the same question again, she will murder and maim him just like she did with Dusty. After all this incident, Don has heard threats from Mona before, which forces him to live a life of paranoia and worry. Mona's insanity is getting even worse. She's in very good shape and she plans to eliminate Les Sun, who often beats her son in every match. The next day, the police visit Don's house to inform him that his employee, Dusty, has died. Police also announced that they had successfully arrested the perpetrators, but one of them was still missing. But that doesn't matter, the point is someone reported that Don was at the lodge with Dusty. So Don finally has no choice and he confesses to the police that he had an affair with Dusty. And Dusty's friend asks Don to pay him so that Mona doesn't know what he did. The cop understands Don's situation and sarcastically says that if Mona finds out, he doesn't want to find another body. Mona is annoyed when a neighbor's dog suddenly walks into the garage during their conversation. Mona strongly warns her what to do if she catches the dog on her property again. During Andrew's birthday party, Don finds a neighborhood dog killed and put in a refrigerator. They also enjoy a friendly match against Andrew and Les Sun, but Mona finds Andrew has a hard time winning the game. She then got angry and said the competition was unfair because she thinks Les' oldest son had been using steroids. Don also sees Mona insulting the child's mother with Crone and Mona wants to fucking herself to death. Realizing her brother is in trouble, Allison quickly grabs her stick and smashes her unicorn until it's crushed. Allison is Mona's favorite child, and you can see that Mona always treats Allison better than Andrew. Don is saddened to see how her son is being treated and believes that her daughter Allison will also become more and more like Mona in the future. Eventually he decides it's time to put an end to his wife's madness. He then turned off the garage lights at his home, causing a short circuit and a spark. After running some tests, he opens the valve on the gas bottle to let the gas escape and fill the garage. He then asks his wife to buy some beef for the garage fridge while Don tends the grill. When Mona heads to the garage, Don quickly throws her out and walks away like nothing happened. Meanwhile, Mona is in the garage and when she opens the lamp, an electrical spark appears. The spark explodes the gas-filled garage, killing Mona. Now that it's all over, Don is living in his new home and enjoying the treasures his wife left behind. He and his children now live happily without being bound by his wife's rules, including the fear of being killed by his wife. However, the movie isn't over yet, as the police haven't found Murphy, who ran away from home earlier. Murphy is seen chasing Don's car from behind, and the film ends in the credits with what sounds like Don being shot twice by Murphy. In a stunning and twisted conclusion, Don's attempt to break free from his wife's controlling grasp leads to a tragic turn of events. While he escapes Mona's clutches, the sinister past catches up with him, leaving his fate uncertain and the horrors far from over. Please comment what you think happens.